Hi there, my name is Casper and I am the resident pastry chef over at Anderson's Eatery and Distillery. And today I'm going to show you guys how to make my PRICEMASTER Profiterole. So a profiterole is French for cream puff, or essentially it refers to most choux paste, which is a paste that is made by combining eggs, milk, water, salt, sugar, and flour, mixing it to a certain temperature, and then piping it onto a sheet pan. From there, what we'll do is we'll take these little circles of Craquelin, which are frozen cutouts of butter and sugar, top them, and then put them into the oven for a crispy, fun texture at the end. So first things first, I always like to have my Craquelin set before I do my profiteroles, so that way it's nice and frozen by the time we're ready to take our profiteroles and put them into the oven. So right here in my hands, I've got butter, about 100 grams of it, and I've got brown sugar. That's going to be our sweetening agent, as well as what's going to make the crispy exterior on the top of the puff itself. So I'm going to take my butter, which is down at room temperature, otherwise you might break your mixer. And if you are working in the same building I am, your boss won't buy you another one. So we're going to let that get nice, light, and fluffy for a couple minutes. I normally look for the sugar to lighten in texture and for the butter to be completely combined. You can still feel some of the granules between your fingers, but it's not as aggressive as when they were both separated. So once our sugar starts to lighten in color a little bit, I'm going to turn my mixer right down, because the last thing I want to do is get covered in flour. So I'm going to add this a little bit at a time. I'll start by doing about 1/3 into my mixer. Let that incorporate a little bit, and I'll scrape down the sides of the bowl to make sure I'm not missing any residual butter or sugar. So I spent 4 years learning in college how to do some baking and pastry, but the residual I spent about 7 to 8 years learning French pastry from a wonderful man up north in a dessert-only pastry place. So once all of my flour is into my mixer, I'm gonna wait for my mixture to look homogeneous. I'll also scrape my beater as well as the sides of my bowl to make sure I didn't miss anything before I sit here and roll these out. From here, I'll take it. It's almost completely mixed, but not quite. You can still see some white patches. So the choux paste themselves, I start by putting water, whole milk, butter, because butter makes everything better, salt, and sugar. What we're going to do is we're going to bring that up to a boil so everything combines. There's going to be no leftover granules, and you don't have that weird grainy feel between your fingers. Once this does come to a boil, I will caution you that the next step immediately is to take your flour and throw it right into the pot. Now, this may seem a little funky and interesting at first, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to cook a lot of that flour flavor out of the paste itself, and this accomplishes a decent amount of that. So we're going to let this cook for a little while. I like to stir it a little bit just to combine my salt and my sugar, because I don't really feel like making choux paste caramel today. So once we do add this flour in, you're going to notice it starts to clump, and that's perfectly all right. That's what we're looking for. We want it to be all in one. Start stirring. Have some faith in the process. Trust the process. Baking is a lot of trusting the process. I do have my heat off in this moment. However, I'm going to turn it back on to low. What we're looking for is we're looking for all of this to join together into one bowl, and we're looking for a film to start appearing on the bottom of our pot. In a moment, I will be taking this mixture and I will be dumping it straight into my mixer that is equipped with a paddle attachment already. I find that if I have things set in place before, it makes my life a lot easier when I go to start moving through the remainder of the project. So I will be cutting my heat. I will be running down this way. Pour it straight in. And turn your mixer to about 4 to 6. We let that go for about 4 to 6 minutes as well until all the steam is cleared out of our bowl. We can take our hand and put it on the very bottom of the bowl, and we don't burn ourselves. I'm a line cook. I've got line cook hands, so cut me a break. But We'll be taking about 3 to 4 eggs after the fact, and this part's pretty important. You want to make sure that these guys are up at room temperature before you start this project. All of your leavening agents are going to be coming from this egg. There's nothing else, no baking powder, no baking soda, just a prayer and an egg. Alright, so now that we're starting to cool off a little bit, we can see on our mixer it's getting a little bit piecey, as I'll put it. It's not one big ball of dough anymore, it's just kind of pieces that are rocking around the inside of it. I'm going to turn my mixer down, and we're going to add our eggs one at a time. Now, I will caution you, this is the part where you really do have to trust the process. It looks interesting when you start to add them. It looks very, very separated, but once you scrape the sides of your bowl, it will come all back together. You do want to be careful that you're not adding in too many eggs at once. This is also a recipe that's very similar to biscuits, in that it's a ratio to where you might need more eggs someday because the air is more humid, and other days you might not. You might need just 1 or 2. So because it's mostly combined, I'm going to stop my mixer because there isn't as much heat as there once was. It's no longer boiling, and we've had a chance for the air to move around it, and it's cooled a little bit. There's no risk of these eggs scrambling in the mixer right now in this time. Eggs start to coagulate at about 165 degrees, and because I can put my hand on the bottom of it, we are well below that. We are about 100, probably about 95-ish. We got one in there, let's add a second one. We don't have nearly enough for the texture we are looking for. We are looking for it to just start falling off of the paddle attachment. We don't want it to be soupy, we don't want it to be too thick. Too thick and your puffs might not rise. Too thin and they're gonna get really soupy and they'll get really, really big and take forever to bake. The texture might also not be where you want them to be either. When we open these guys up, we're looking for them to be nice and hollow, so that way we can sit there and stuff them with fun things and top them. Yeah? Is this all right? I'm having a good time too. So it is definitely a little bit thinner. I can see some gluten starting to develop right off of the paddle. You can see these strands starting to connect. That's the gluten developing. If I sit here and let this go for way too long, it will get really tough. I think that might be the last egg I use. So I'm gonna hold off right there and I'll let my mixer do its thing for a moment. And you can tell it's good when you lower your mixer, you pull it up, and you see that it's just starting to fall. It's not dripping, it's not sitting there and being a Dairy Queen swirl where it kind of holds its shape, especially once you flip it upside down. So in my opinion, this is pretty good to go. Put this into a pastry bag with a nice little round tip on it. And I find that if I overfill my bag, it becomes hard for me to get consistent shapes. And with something that is special, especially in this house, I take great pride on the fact of the appearance of the plate. So I try very, very hard to make sure everything is as artistic as I can possibly make it to ensure everybody has a very special experience when they do come see us. So take your plastic, you can force all of your batter down into the bottom of your bag, and there's no residual up here. So this was actually originally a macaron silpat, but I have repurposed it because we like to adapt in this house. So I'm going to start with my bag just a little bit up off the sheet pan. Otherwise it'll create that flat top that we're not looking for, and I'm going to start slowly squeezing. I'll stop, twist, so that way I don't have this little top right here. If you do get that tip, that's okay. I will show you how to fix that after the fact. But because we're adding the crackling on top, we don't want it there. It'll inhibit the sticking of the crackling. So if you do have that little top, all you have to do is take a little bit of water, take your finger, pat them down. I knew a French pastry chef who at one point would take a towel, a tea towel, and dampen it and just rose. Alright, so those are the profits. In order to make the PRICEMASTER color on top, we are going to be using raspberries today because I am a big fan of natural flavors and everything being from scratch and natural in this house. I do not like fillers, and that's why with a lot of my desserts, it is almost all the time handmade by myself. and as local or as seasonal as I can do it. So I'm going to be taking about a pint of raspberries, beautiful raspberries, and I'll be taking about 1/4 cup of sugar. These raspberries are fairly sweet on their own, but we do want to add a little bit of sugar to add some viscosity to the sauce itself. It'll create a nice little thickness and it won't be quite so thin. I'll also squeeze about 1/2 a lemon over the top of this as well. So I'll take this and run all the way down to my burner. I'll add just a couple tablespoons of water so that way the sugar has something to grab onto, and I'll turn it up nice and high for a moment to get these raspberries to burst. And after they're nice and like juicy and broken open, we'll take it and turn it down to a simmer for about 10 to 20 minutes. I get you. All right, we're starting to thicken up over here a little bit. Just starting to thicken up inside my pot. I've gone from 1.5 million small, very fast-moving bubbles to some bigger ones on the inside and just a couple in the center. We're looking for a consistency sort of like this, which means all of our water has evaporated out for the most part. What we're doing is caramelizing the sugars of the raspberry and the sugar that we added earlier. So I'm going to kill my heat. I'm going to turn this way. And right over here on top of a little ice bath, I have another bowl. All I'm going to do is strain it, and what this does is it's going to sit here and cool it down. And it's going to stop that cooking process so I don't continually lose that chlorophyll in the red. So there's actually a natural thickener in raspberries, berries, apples, a lot of different things called pectin. And what I'm doing right here is I'm pressing these seeds to get the last of that pectin and the last of the juice from the inside of those raspberries. As this starts to cool, it will start to thicken up quite a bit. If you want it thinner, cook it less time. If you want it, or add some simple syrup in at the end. If you want it thicker, you can cook it for more time. I will caution you though, the longer you cook it, if you strain things out, you'll end up with a jelly. But if you leave whole pieces in, you'll end up with a compote or a jam. So I kind of give my bowl a nice little spin. And that looks a little bit like the PRICEMASTER in my opinion. So I'm gonna let this guy hang out and cool here while I get started on another project. Yeah, so this one is honeycomb candy. This is something I make a lot of the time when I get sick, but it's good for any time, really. So what I'm doing is I'm adding in a mixture of glucose, honey, and sugar. The glucose in this recipe is going to make sure that my sugar doesn't recrystallize before I want it to. I'm adding some water because when I make a caramel, I prefer to add water to mine to ensure that it all turns the same temperature at the same time. So from here, I'm going to take this mixture and bring it all the way up to about 300 degrees. I will caution you, honey does become carcinogenic if you do heat it up too far. And I'm talking about past like 400 degrees though. I'm not talking about 301, 313. If you do that at home, that's fine. It's going to taste a little burnt, but it's still going to be all right. So, in my ramekin in my hand, I've got a mixture of baking soda and salt that I'm shaking around. The reason being is I don't want any lumps of that baking soda. This project is definitely a little bit more dangerous than some of my others, but it's one of my favorites to kind of show off. It's a candy that is gluten-free. It's very similar to an old-fashioned candy known as sponge candy that you may have gotten when you were a kid going up the coast, like dipped in chocolate. It's a little crunchy, kind of reminiscent of a Butterfinger without the nut flavor. It's got more of the honey burnt flavor, which is what we're looking for. So the thing about candy making is you want to make sure that you have a thermometer and that you're exactly at that temperature, if not 1 to 2 degrees, maybe plus or minus. So I may or may not have broke my candy thermometer, and I use a meat thermometer, which is totally fine. But the dangerous thing about this is you have to hold it, and you have to make sure that your needle is off the bottom of your pan on the stove. Yeah, so as we start losing water in the pan, you'll notice that there's a lot less of these small, fast-moving bubbles. We're starting to creep into these bigger, longer to pop taking bubbles. If you do get some of this napalm hot sugar onto your skin, fair warning, fair advice, don't touch it. Let it harden. It's gonna suck, I promise, but don't touch it, because what you'll do is you'll sit there and stick your hand to the top of it. You're fine where you are right over there, but what I'm gonna do is slowly start to swirl this in, and you're gonna see that it's gonna start to foam like crazy. That's why I wanted you to be careful. Because if you have a pot that is not big enough, this will go all over your kitchen cupboards. Take it and pour it into a very, very nicely greased casserole dish or pan that's metal, not glass. You will crack something, I promise. Put that aside. This will grow. That's why I wanted to do it for you. It will grow, and eventually, once it starts losing the air that's coming out of that baking soda from the chemical reaction that's just occurred, it will start to fall back in on itself. Now, if you move your table too much, you move the pan too much, you'll notice it sinks on itself. It becomes very dense, very tough. Oh, yeah. Another thing to note, it's still fairly liquid in this moment. As you can see, those bubbles still popping. Once it does cool down, it'll become more solid, but don't let it fool you. When you sit there and you put your hand over the top and it's not very hot, it might still be hot on the bottom. That sugar is still setting. If you sit there and you manipulate it too much, what'll happen is it might not be completely dry in time and it'll be stretchy. And it's just gonna ruin the entire consistency of what you're doing. And I think the last one I have for you before the plate up, or actually I've got two. I've got mousse and I got curd. So, when I work with gelatin, I work with gelatin sheets. I work with silver gelatin sheets. I am specific about my gelatin because each gelatin has different thickening properties to it. But in order to work with said gelatin, I'm using about 3 grams. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it and I'm going to pour it straight into this third pan that's sloshing. And I'm going to shingle it so that way there's no dry spots on my sheet of gelatin. So when I go to pull it back out, it's nice and squishy. And this is really loud. And then we're going to take some of our heavy cream and we're going to start getting it whipped to stiff peaks in our mixer. Yeah, it's aggressively loud. So I'll take this guy and put it into my reach-in fridge for a moment and let that sit while we get the rest of our mousse working. To start this one, I will take my sugar. I will take my other amount of heavy cream. There are 2 amounts in this recipe. And I'll take my vanilla bean that I'm going to scrape into this mixture right here. And to make sure I get all of the beans and all the seeds in there, I'll take it and just put right on top. And we're going to bring this mixture up to a boil. We'll drop our gelatin directly inside, and we'll let it cool for a couple minutes. So what we're doing right now is we're making sure our sweetener becomes a liquid right here, so there's no granules, you don't get a grainy mousse. Name of the game is smooth, light, fluffy. Another thing that I think is a problem when it comes to American desserts and pastries, and you'll hear me talk about it all the time if you ever come to see me, there's no salt, there's no balance. It is a massive sugar bomb. I cannot stand that. If you're going to be doing something, don't do it halfway, do it all the way, in my opinion. And when you're doing composed plated desserts, why? Why would you sit there and under-season something when you could sit there and bring out its full potential, caramelize all of its sugars? So now that this is at a rolling boil, can't really walk away from it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kill my heat. I'm going to come straight back down this way. I'm going to take those gelatin sheets that, yeah, they actually did rehydrate that quickly. Squeeze out that water. We don't want to add too much water into this recipe right here. You're going to end up with a watery, flavorless mousse. The other purpose we heated this mixture up is so that way we can melt our gelatin into it as well. If you sit there and incorporate these gelatin leaves into just straight cold cream, A, it's not going to melt, and B, it's just going to get beads of gelatin if it does finally melt. And that's what we're trying to avoid. So, I'll come down with these two. Right back to my table. Put my knife safely over here. For one, straight into my bowl. Now, I don't see a personal reason to strain it because there was one vanilla bean in there and I counted it, found it. And also all of my gelatin mixed in it as well. If you are concerned about there being beads of gelatin in it, go ahead and strain it. What I'm doing now is I'm chilling that mixture we just boiled. Otherwise, when we go to add our whipped cream into it, to create that mousse-like consistency, it's going to deflate. We don't want that. So I'll kind of spin it around a little bit, make sure I'm hitting all the sides, the bottom. You'll start to see when your mixture gets too cold and it starts to solidify. That's okay for right now. You can pull it off and have it remelt into itself because there's still some heat in the rest of the mixture. You'll start to notice it's slower to move as I spin it. If we continued it like this and this was a creme anglaise base, do you know what I'd be making? Ice cream. The act of making ice cream is churning air into your custard base, as well as freezing it at the same time. So, this to me is room temp. I know this because my gelatin has started to coagulate, and that's what gelatin does when it hits about 60 to 80 degrees. I'm going to take that cream that I whipped earlier, straight out of here. Make sure I get all of it off of my whip. And I'm just going to go straight into this mousse mixture. So, I do 2 different additions. I want to make sure it's not getting too cold and I don't shock that mixture I had just been spinning in the double bowl. I also want to make sure it's not too hot, that it doesn't start deflating. And if it does, well, good news, I have more. I mix it until it's nice and incorporated, and from here, I'm just going to chill it for a couple hours. I got a little creative the other day.
You don't say.
Well, you see, this is a little different than even I normally go, which surprised me. I have a best friend in this house when it comes to dark chocolate, and I think anybody who's been following me for a while will have realized this. I love Amarena cherries. I love the sour Italian cherry. I do not like maraschino. I don't like the fact that they use almond extract, so I can't enjoy them and the rest of my friends. And I don't like the fact that they use things that have components that are used in bleach. So I avoid them, and I will always use the Amarena cherries. That being said, when the PRICEMASTER project was introduced to me, I was trying very hard to find a very natural, very vibrant, and bright red. Now, I got close at first, and then I realized that after I added my egg yolks in, it wasn't red at all, but it was so tasty, I couldn't not put it on the profiterole. So instead of making, normal cherry sauce, I sat there and I was like, what if I made a curd out of Amarena cherries, like a lemon curd? So what I did was I took 2 egg yolks and 1 full egg, because I'm looking for the fat content within the egg yolks. I'm not looking for the protein within the egg whites, which is why I've added a higher ratio of yolks to whites. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a couple ounces of the straight Amarena cherry juice. I'm going to bring that guy up to a nice little boil. I'm going to temper it into my egg yolks, return it into the stovetop, and cook it until it becomes custard at 185. Add some butter, and that's it. Absolutely. Now you see why I thought it would be like the perfect PRICEMASTER. And then I forgot how color theory worked. So I let this go for a second, kill the heat. And then, go good, I'll come your way. I'll go right over here. And then right here, I'm gonna start whisking. I'm gonna break up my eggs quite a bit, make sure they're nice and warm, so that way when I go and introduce my juice into it, it's not such a big shock to them and it doesn't scramble them on the spot. Let's see, so little by little. Once you add in some, you can get comfortable adding more the next addition. But like I said, they will start to coagulate at about 165, so you do have to be a little bit careful. So, well, you can also see, I didn't do half bad either. There's not a ton of scramble on the bottom. So I'll bring this back to my stovetop, and I'll return the heat to it. But I'll make sure that it's fairly low. I want to prevent the sticking on the bottom. I'm looking for the temperature 185. And actually, I'm adding butter into my curd to add a little bit of richness. About 56 grams. And as the butter melts, the mixture is going to cool as well, and we're not going to be in danger of scrambling our eggs anymore. After we've had these guys come out of the oven, I'm going to grab a knife and cut that. So after about 20 minutes in the oven, you'll notice that once you put them in, they are obviously still very pasty with that little cutout on top, but they start to puff. You really don't want to open your oven at all because the steam is the only thing that's causing these things to rise. You open it for a brief second to say, hey, they are growing, great, my project's working, that's fine. Get excited, be passionate, but don't sit there every like 30 seconds and just keep popping your oven. You're losing heat, you're losing air. So if you've done it right, you can sit there and cut these guys. These guys are wonderful actually the day after, and they make killer ice cream sandwiches as well. Nice and hollow on the top. So what I'll do from here is now is the fun part. I like to sit here and try and figure out what I'm doing and exactly how to plate it. So I'll start with a little bit of vanilla cream on the bottom. I don't like it when my stuff starts to run away. There we go, food glue, woohoo! Take a nice little ring of your vanilla mousse. Right around the outside. What I'm gonna do, you're doing raspberry and it's PriceMaster and he's full of surprises. I am too. I'll put a raspberry in there. Now, our beautiful cherry gel that we've created, our cherry curd. I'm gonna take this and coat the outside of my raspberry with it. Quite often, I'll tell you right now that I don't know exactly how I'm gonna plate something up or how certain things are gonna taste until I'm actually in the moment. And that's one of the most exciting things for me. So now I think I'm just gonna sit here and hide my little secret surprise. Like that. I'm gonna take some of my honeycomb candy that I made. After it's cooled for a while, you can see that it has these nice, beautiful air pockets. It has that, it's very reminiscent of sponge candy, but it does have a different texture as well. So what I'll do is I'll take it. It is quite delicate. You can crumble it in your hands. And I'll put just a couple pieces on there for some texture, right? Take a little bit more of the fresh fruit. I'm a very, very avid fan of including fruit on most, if not all of my desserts as well. Clean, clean as you go. Nobody likes a messy kitchen. Now our raspberry coulis we worked so hard on, I'll shake it a little bit. Nice little Saturn. Will brighten the plate, right? I'll put this up on here. You know what? I think the PriceMaster gets a little bit more raspberry gel because, you know, it's the PriceMaster. We have to be extravagant for him. I'll take a couple pieces of this honeycomb candy as well and just kind of decorate the plate wherever I feel like it needs it, right? Finally, because we haven't been extra enough in this house, we're gonna take some edible glitter spray, and this is the one exception I will make of it being not natural. I am a very big fan of glitter. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm starting to think that that's looking like $4 trillion. Yes, so every third Wednesday of the month at 6:30, I host a baking class here in this house. It's $20 a person.
Riley,
Yeah.
what's the future of Denton?
You know what? I think it's gonna be more community and more gay.
What's the future of Denton? Flying cars.
What's the future of Denton?
You know what? We're fairly new here. Only been here a little over a year and a half. But I have seen. I don't really worry about it too much. Every time we turn around, the people here are coming together and helping whoever needs to be helped. So the politicians may screw it up, but the people will fix it eventually.
Are you going to walk Boomer down the road? You're not going to walk Boomer down the road.
How much for just one? Ah, yes, just for one of those.
All right, here's how it's gonna work. We're going to play this song, and this song is...
Hi, Little DTV. Here at Delta 8 Denton, we think the future of Denton is greener. As a city, we hope that we can come together to support federally legal hemp. Yay!
At auction house, they had one of the gold pieces, and the gold piece was an 1878 gold piece. And I said the train was robbed in September of 1877. So here's what they're doing, is they're coming back with gold pieces and they're spending currency marked for the next year. Do you see the problem? See how that would raise a few eyebrows?
I would say that each day there's more and more interest in our comic magazines. The college kids have discovered them. Of course, the young people have always been into comics, and all the ages in between seem to be latching on.
Derek himself falls prey to the very fate he had planned for Chris.
Oh, Miss Edna, I didn't know what else to do.
Derek was involved in drug traffic, and he tried to kill me.